Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Our topic today is the future of Iran in Bible prophecy. Now, I've hesitated to bring this topic to you because I could see that there was so many other people talking about it, and I thought, they got it. But it kept coming to me that I need to talk about this. So I thought, let me see what the others are saying. So I pulled up what some of the other people are saying, and all of a sudden I see why I need to bring this topic because, Bible prophecy is who I are. And very few people, not trying to pat myself on the back, very few people understand it like I do. But I will say this. If you will stay with me to the end, I think you're going to see Iran in a whole new light through Bible prophecy. Now, for you to get this one, you got to understand some background, so I got to do a little bit of Bible teaching, but I promise you by the end, it's going to be pretty exciting, okay? First of all, the background. Now, I'm going to move through this quickly. You may be familiar with it. So, back in Genesis 25, Isaac's wife was not having children, so he went to the Lord. And Rebekah, his wife, Isaac's wife Rebekah, conceived. And because she was having trouble in her childbirth, she went to the Lord. And the Lord prophesied to Rebekah and said, 2 nations, this is important, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 different kind of people. One will be stronger than the other, and that the elder will serve, the elder shall serve the younger. It's not normally that way. Normally, firstborn is first, okay? So then, the first one that came out was red all over, hairy garment, Esau, okay? The man of the field. He took hold on Esau's heel, and so they called him, the second one, Jacob. Esau was a cunning hunter of the field, whereas Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. Now, Esau became, my opinion, what is not all, but most of the Arabs today are of Esau descent, according to the research I've done. Whereas most of the Jews or the people who live in Israel were the sons of Israel, are descendants of descendants of Jacob. Get this straight here. Okay, so here's how it all started. So Isaac is an old man. His eyes are dim. He can barely hear. He calls his favorite son Esau in. Go out and shoot me a deer. Bring me the food because I'm about to die. I want to prophesy and bless you. The wife Rebekah overhears and says, I want Jacob to get it, not Esau. So she arranges to have a little switcheroo. So she goes to Jacob and says, look it, I'm going to fix you 2 goats. And you're going to take that in. You're going to tell Dad that you are actually Esau. But Mom, won't I get a curse for that? And she says, no, the curse be on me. You just do as I'm telling you. And so they put on, without getting all the details, they got Jacob to pass for Esau. So anyway, here's what happened. So Esau was a hairy man, and Jacob says, I'm a smooth man. He said, look it, I'm going to put this goat skin on you, and he's not going to know, and he's going to think you are Esau, and you tell him you're Esau. So they switched the raiment around, the skins of the kids of the goats upon his hands, upon the back of his neck, so he could feel and think that he was not Jacob, but that he was Esau. So once the deception was complete, so Esau goes in and says, I'm your firstborn, and I would like to get the blessing. And so he checks him out. He says, well, are you really, are you really Esau? And he said, yeah. And he says, well, these are the hands of Esau, but the voice is of Jacob. Art thou really my son Esau? And he said, yes, I am. Okay, so now we got to the point. So here comes the blessing. This is the blessing that is supposed to be to the firstborn. This is important. Let me catch you here, okay? The firstborn. But it's given to the secondborn. Jacob was the secondborn. Therefore God given unto thee dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and plenty of corn and wine. Now, the problem is that someone that just reads this casually would never pick this up. but because I have done extensive, did I say extensive? I mean deep. I mean months and months of research into this oil thing. I found 65 verses that say in the last days massive amounts of oil will be found in Israel. Most people think when it's talking about fatness, it's talking about olive oil because they look at Israel today and they say, well, Israel, about the only oil Israel exports in those days is olive oil. It's not talking about olive oil. It's talking about crude oil because if you look at the word for the word fatness, it's Strong's reference number 4924, which is the word mashman. Now, I just checked with my Hebrew teacher in Israel, and I specifically asked for a confirmation. Is mashman talking about crude oil? And she said yes. Well, I'd already seen that from the scriptures, but I got a second confirmation. So it goes on to say, now here's what was prophesied to Jacob, i.e. Israel today. Let people serve you, nations bow down to you, you'll be Lord of your brethren, means that Israel will be Lord over the Arabs. Hang on. And let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. That means that the Arabs would be subservient to the Israelis. And throughout history, that mostly has been true, but hang on. Cursed be everyone that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. Now, all of a sudden, Esau walks in. Dad says, I already gave the blessing away, man. You got the firstborn blessing. So Esau says, don't you have a little bit of a blessing for me? So Dad says, okay, all right, fine. Come here, I'll bless you. So he says, to thee also shall be the fatness of the earth. Now, have the Arabs got oil? Crude oil? Yes, they have. Well, what about Israel? I'm going to explain that. They're going to get it, and it's all a matter of time. Anyway, now here's a big point. Excuse me. Verse 40, it says, and by thy sword shalt thou live. That's what we are seeing right now with Iran. Because Iran is saying, we want to charge people as they go through the Hormuz Strait. Trump is saying, no, you're not going to do that. And Iran is saying, well, then we're going to fire missiles at them. That's living by the sword. Living by the sword is, you give me what I want or I hit you in the nose. You give me what I want or I pull out the sword or I pull out the bullet against you. That's blackmail. And until oil was discovered in the Arab nations that gave them the money to get what they want through money, that's pretty much the way many of them, again, I'm not attacking all of the Arabs, I'm not attacking all the Muslims. I know this is not true of all of them, but it is prophesied to their bloodline. That is what the Bible says. All right, let's go on. Now, I looked up Iran, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar. How did oil affect these nations? Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, oil was first discovered in the Arab countries in 1908. Then Saudi Arabia, it was found there 1938. So 30 years later. Then Kuwait, also 38, couldn't get out of the ground until 46. And then Qatar got it out of the ground in 40. So this was the prophecy being fulfilled. But if you notice, the first one to get it was Iran. How does Iran live even today? Even though they have oil, they have lots of money, they live by the sword because they keep saying death to America, death to Israel. Okay, well, let's go on. Now, how else does oil have to do with Iran? How much oil is produced annually? Well, 13.6 million barrels a day is America. 10, Saudi Arabia, 4.2 Iran, that's still pretty healthy, 2.7 Kuwait, 1.3 Qatar, but look at Israel, about 15,000 barrels a day. That's barely enough to fill your car. That's not much at all. So I wanted to show you just the drastic difference. If you look at America, the Christian nation, it is by far more than all the Arabs. But look over to the right bottom corner. Israel barely even shows up on the chart, just almost nothing at all. But that's about to change. That's about to turn around. Because the only reason oil has not been found in Israel is either they've been drilling in the wrong place or they haven't been drilling deep enough. And I say both are true. They haven't been drilling in the right place and they haven't been drilling deep enough. And That's all I'm going to say about that. So before I go on, I don't want you to be deceived. Some will say that the Antichrist comes from Iran. That's not correct. Not correct. So what about Iran and their future? What does the Bible say about Iran and the future? Nations who attack Israel at Armageddon, and guess what? One of them will be Iran. Now, I've got to give you some background. So this is Ezekiel 38 and 39. These two chapters are famous chapters. These are the chapters talking about when Jesus returns for Armageddon, when the nations of the earth comes down to attack Israel. Now, I'm going to breeze through it fast, but I want to get to verse 5. That's the main point. And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog. We believe that to be the leader of Russia, the land of Magog. And I'm going to show you a map. It has the word Magog scratched right across the land of Russia. And the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. Meshach is two word changes from what the modern word is Moscow. And Tubal is three word changes from the modern word, the largest city in Russia, which is Tobolsk. So, in my opinion, there is no question. These verses are talking about Russia. And I say, Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I'm against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and I will turn thee back, and I'll put hooks into thy jaws. And I will bring thee forth, all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers, shields, all of them handling swords. What did it say? That the Arabs would live by the sword. So you don't give me the oil, I come down for the swords. Now, when I was teaching through making one of my DVDs on oil, I showed them where Leslie was shown in a dream where the oil flows underneath Israel. And I'll tell you this, it's in the shape of a fish hook. And as I said that, Eric Bowser, one of our congregation members, said, and that's the hook in the jaw. I'd never seen it that way, but out of that guy's mouth, that's exactly right. Meaning, the hook that draws the Russians and all of our Islamic buddies down to attack Israel for Armageddon is the oil found in Israel. Hayseed Stevens told me this. He said that he did a DNA analysis. He said oil has DNA too. DNA analysis of all of the oil in Israel and the nations surrounding Israel, and it all has the same DNA, meaning it all comes from the deep, deep, one single source underground. Meaning the Russian oil comes from Israel. Same thing, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Iran, it all comes from Israel. What he believed, is what Hayseed Stevens believed, that when we punch an oil well, at the southwest end of the Dead Sea, the lowest place on earth, he says he believes that it will start lowering the wellhead pressures and eventually making the wells of the nations, the Arab nations around Israel, begin to go dry. That's the hook of the jaw. They are forced by God to come down to attack Israel because Israel has their oil. And I said, well, what makes you think that it would dry the wells of the surrounding nations? He said, what's the lowest place on earth? I said, Dead Sea. He said, so what happens in a bathtub? When you pull the stopper, where does the water drain to? I said, it drains out through the drain. He said, the lowest place in the bathtub. So when you pull the oil out of the lowest place on earth, what happens? In other words, he says, so I said, so what you're saying is the oil is underneath Israel, and then it is forced up to Russia, Qatar, Iran, Saudi Arabia, these other nations. He said, correct. The deep source oil comes from Israel. Now, let me look at the next one. You want to know what happens to Iran? Well, the ancient name for Iran was Persia. So here it is, Persia, Ethiopia, Libya with them. All of them with shield and helmet, Gomer, which is Turkey, and all the bands in the house of Togarmah, which is also up in the Turkey area. I'll show you in a minute. All of them with quarters and all the bands and many people with them, meaning one of the nations that's going to be coming down to attack Israel at Armageddon and destroyed is going to be Iran. Now, let me move on. So here's the map I said I'd show you. Let's start at the top. So if you see at the top, circled by the blue, it says Gomer. That was one of the words here. Top right, Magog. There it is, scratched right across Russia. Right below Magog, you see Meshach, Gog, Magog. And then below that is Togarmah. That's one of the words. Gomer, Turkey. Down at the bottom right in the yellow is Persia, Iraq. All of those nations run out of oil because massive amounts of oil is starting to get pulled out of Israel and their wells start going dry. That's the hook of the jaw that gets them to come down to attack Israel so Jesus can return and destroy them. It's a trap, and they have to do. It's a hook in their jaw. They have to come down. They run out of oil. Now let's go to Revelation. How does that fit in with Revelation, the last days? The sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. So we can look to who's going to be attacking Israel, the kings of the east. Okay, who are the kings of the east? If you look in the very center, the blue that I've outlined there is actually the Euphrates River. So who is east of the Euphrates River? These nations. These nations are east of it. So they all come down to attack Israel. The world's largest oil field is located at the southwest end of the Dead Sea, 1982, Hayseed Stevens. Now, let me tell you that story briefly. So, in 1982, Hayseed Stevens, full-time oil man, part-time pastor out of Willow Park, Texas, was invited to go to Israel to meet then Prime Minister Menachem Begin. He said while he was there, he said the Lord spoke to his heart and said that the world's largest oil field is located at the southwest end of the Dead Sea. He said, well, if it is, it's got to be in the Bible. So he came back, he found 17 verses in the Bible that say, in the last days, massive amounts of oil will be found in Israel. And when I got involved, I started researching it. I've now found 65 verses, including the one verse that, if you understand the verse and have the right map, tells you where the oil is located. And there's some other places too, but again, I put that into a PowerPoint presentation, but I've not made the presentation. And I won't until we hit oil, and then I will explain to you how I knew to do what I will do. Anyway, we'll move on. 65 verses say the last days, massive amounts of oil will be found in Israel. Then, June 27th, 2008, I'm skipping a lot of the story here. I set up an 18-city speaking tour. After I spoke in Amarillo, June 27th, 2008, my prayer closet, prayed before I went to bed, and I said, Lord, I hope you're pleased what we're doing, because not too many people showing up, not too many people getting saved, not too many people interested in oil in Israel. And went to sleep, and that night I heard words. I mean, God spoke to me, just like you're hearing me talk right now. And he said, Stan, I will give you the money to drill the well in Israel. Well, it woke me up, and I asked a question. I said, the oil well in Israel? But there was no answer. It was like, son, that's all I'm going to say. If you can't figure it out from there, then you're in trouble. So just where, Stan, just where in the Bible does it say that God is going to give oil to Israel? Now, again, I found 65 verses. I can take the next 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, covering all those verses. I'm not going to cover all of them, just a few of them. Here's the first verse. Now, you recall Moses is up in the Mount Sinai area, and an audible voice spoke to him and said, Moses, take off your shoes. This is holy ground. Then he says, get you up. I'm going to send you into land flowing with milk and honey. Well, what is the milk and honey? Now, remember that question. We're going to get to it. Now, let's go to Deuteronomy 33. This is when Isaac is giving out, I think it's Isaac. Could be Isaac. I'm not sure. It could be someone. One of the great fathers of Israel is giving prophecies. So he calls Benjamin in. Now, this is what was prophesied to Benjamin. He gives it. Then verse 13 has the prophecy to Joseph. And of Joseph he said, Blessed be of the Lord be his land, for the precious things of heaven, for the dew, and for the deep that coucheth beneath. Now, if you look at the bottom left, you see the kind of a pink circle with SJ. This is my interpretation based upon my researching, going back into the actual Hebrew words and my understanding of all the other 65 verses that are found and what God has laid on my heart. I believe this to be an accurate interpretation. Now, I'm not trying to make a word-for-word interpretation. I'm trying to summarize what I believe verse 13 is saying. What I believe it's saying is, and of Joseph he prophesied, God will place you upon the best land on the earth and cause you to eat by a sticky grease product sucked from flint rock. Then, verse 14, next verse, and for the precious fruits brought by the sun, and for the precious things put forth by the moon, and for the chief things of the ancient mountains, and for the precious things of the lasting hills. We'll skip the next part. That's verse 14. This is my interpretation of verse 14. A valuable product, crude oil, causing wealth will shoot forth like a ray gushing from the earth. It will be a valuable produce expelled forth monthly. And these great blessings will come forth from the land, creating extreme wealth once concealed in the hills. A valuable product from the earth will cause wealth, and double delight will permanently bless Joseph. Verse 19, they shall call the people into the mountain. There they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness, and they shall suck of the abundance of the seas and treasures hid in the sand. I guess you know that massive amounts of natural gas has been discovered out in the seas of the Mediterranean. This is my interpretation. I will call my people to the mountain where there shall offer righteousness, and I will give them prosperity sucked as in milk, resources from the sea and concealed and hidden in the sand. Israel then shall then dwell in safety alone. The fountain of Jacob shall be upon the land of corn and wine, and also his heavens shall drop down dew. Well, this is what I think it's saying. Israel will live in a place of refuge and divide the fountain of Jacob. What's the fountain? Gathering the earth's increase like grape juice, like squeezing a grape, okay? Grape juice squirted out, the sky will drop down double blessings. What's that saying? I believe it's talking about gushers, where the oil gushes out. Sometimes it gushes out with such pressure, you can't stop it. Matter of fact, this is Spindletop, 1901. Took them 9 days to stop it from gushing. It blew over 200 feet of pipe straight up into the air when they hit it. It just blew everything out. All of the pipe, everything. 9 days to stop it from gushing. And that made America great. Here's another picture of another kind of a gusher. Okay, verse 13. He made him, talking about Israel, ride on the high places of the earth. That doesn't mean like Mount Everest. It's talking about the best place on earth, blessed land on the earth. And there's two scriptures that says that Israel is the glory of all lands. That he might eat the increase of the fields, that he might make him to suck honey out of the rock. We're going to get to this in just a second. And oil out of the flinty rock. Hayseed Stevens told me that some of the best rock to get oil out of is flinty rock because it's porous. The oil flows right through it, okay? So this is my summary based upon 65 verses that I've found. This is me summarizing all of them. In the last days, I, God, will give Israel the hidden treasures of yellow crude oil sucked from rock deep in the earth. I will cause the nations to fear and tremble at the wealth, the milk and honey or gas and oil promised to Moses. With it I will build the waste cities, making Israel the glory of all lands, the best land on the earth, returning Israel to her former estate of wealth and prosperity. So what is milk and honey? The Bible says he's going to give Israel milk and honey. So if you look at 32:13, it says to suck honey out of the rock. What honey is it talking about? In Psalm 81:16, with honey out of the rock. Several places talk about honey out of the rock. This is what black crude oil, this most people are familiar with. This is tea-colored crude oil. They call it Texas tea because when you put it into a clear glass, it looks like tea. This is some red crude oil that I got a sample sent to me from the Deepwater Horizon when it exploded out September 19th of 2010. This is green crude oil. I've got some. And it looks black till you hold it up in the light, and you can see it's got a green hue to it. It's actually a very, very dark green. This is yellow crude oil. Now, I brought this because we recognize this. Here, let me put a light on it. There you go. That's honey color. That's honey. This is yellow-colored crude oil. Now, I want you to notice the difference between them. Okay? See, this is low viscosity, if I'm getting it right here. Means it's lighter than, how do I say it? It's less thick than water. Whereas honey is very thick. You know, you can turn it and see the bubble, everything, okay? So that's honey. If you look at this, you could say that's the honey. In 1973, Andy Sorrell drilled a series of shallow natural gas wells in Israel, and he hit a light showing of natural gas, but he said it came out of sand as white as table salt. So I think that when it's talking about honey, it's talking about yellow-colored crude oil, which is the highest quality crude oil on the earth. And when it's talking about milk, I think it's talking about gas. So milk and honey is actually gas and oil. So when God spoke to Moses, said, get you up, I'm sending you into land flowing with milk and honey, he was saying, get you up, I'm sending you into land that flows with gas and oil, my opinion. So if we go to the next verse, these are some of the colors of crude oil. Yellow, Texas tea, red, and the black, that's what they use on the roads these days, just black crude oil. The price of the crude oil. Okay, so when the viscosity is heavy, you get a low price. It doesn't have as much energy in it. But the best priced oil is the yellow-colored crude oil. This is a picture that I took of me holding yellow crude oil when I first got it. This was several years ago, as you can tell by the change in my hair color. Gushing out grease and honey-colored crude oil. So, one more question. Why hasn't God already given Israel the massive amounts of oil promised to them? Well, there's a very good reason. Psalm 81:13. Oh, that my people had hearkened unto me, and Israel had walked in my ways. I should have soon subdued their enemies, and turned my hand against their adversaries. The haters of the Lord should have submitted themselves unto him, but their time should have endured forever. In other words, if Israel had accepted Jesus, if Israel had turned to God with their whole heart, they would have got the oil a long time ago, and their enemies surrounded them would all have been subdued or not been a problem. Then verse 16, he should have fed them also with the finest of the wheat, and with honey out of the rock should I have satisfied thee. What kind of honey comes out of a rock? The bees build nests in rocks? No, they do not. So there's only one kind of honey that comes out of rock, and that would be yellow-colored crude oil. I will give Israel milk and honey. Jeremiah 33:14. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will perform that good thing which I have promised. Milk and honey. In other words, God is saying, I will do what I told them I would do. I will give them the milk and honey. If you don't want to lose your life's savings, if you have an IRA or a 401k, the thing to do is call 800-200-GOLD. 800-200-GOLD. These folks are Christians, and they specialize in helping people not lose their life savings in the event of a stock market crash and things like that. Look, most of the 401ks, most of the IRAs are in paper, backed by paper, and as Lindsey Williams says, if it's in paper, it's worth the paper it's written on. You can lose it all. 1-800-200-GOLD. 800-200-GOLD. Hey, give them a call. Doesn't hurt. Doesn't cost you anything. See if they can give you some good advice. When the suitcase nukes, I didn't say if, I said when the suitcase nukes go off, if you want your car to start, if you want your computers and your refrigerators and things like that, anything with a computer chip to work, you want to have one of these from EMPShield.com. EMPShield.com. And they have videos up there. It takes about 10 minutes to put on. It's not complicated at all. And if you use the word prophecy, promo code prophecy, you get a $50 discount, and it helps Prophecy Club.